Hello and welcome back to Let's Talk God. It's a blessing to have you join us again today on our Faith Talk series. We're on series 3. Thank you for being with us thus far. So today we're focusing on a word called the Faith Foundation Check. I know that word sounds strange to you, but we're going to give you more insight as we move along. Now, what is the Faith Foundation? Let's put it this way. When you're building a house, there are two key elements in your house in terms of the structure. For those of you that are into construction, you understand what I mean. The first most important factor of you building a house is what? The foundation. The foundation has to be faultless. It has to be able to withstand any kind of pressure, any kind of wind, any kind of rain. So your foundation, you put all your resources into that to make sure the structure holds. This is also the same thing with faith. Your faith, the foundation has to be unshakable. And when I say unshakable, it has to be built on something that does not move. So you can't build your faith on what people tell you. You cannot build your faith on what people promise you. I've heard and I've seen so many people that trusted people based on what they say, and their faith was destroyed. So those are not solid foundations. So as we go through this series, we're going to speak about what a solid foundation is as we go further into it. Now, once you're done with the foundation, what's the second most important thing in a house? The roofing. The roofing is what protects what the faith, which is your foundation, carries. Your roof has to be faultless. There can be no hole in it. There can be no loophole. The structure has to be impeccable. This protects what's in your house. That's the second aspect of building a house of faith. So how strong is your foundation, and how wind and rain proof is your roofing? We will elaborate these two components as we go further. Now let's dive into the word. You can't have faith without fear. That's a key important thing you need to understand. A lot of people will tell you that faith is the absence of fear. No, it's not. Far from it. Fear actually determines how strong your faith is. For those of you that watched cartoon when you were a kid, and for some of us that still watch it today, let's take Scooby-Doo for example. It might be familiar to most of you. Scooby-Doo is a character that every day they go through a situation where they test their fear, they test their faith. Now they encounter so many ghosts and so many stories where something that they're afraid of, they're up against. And the problem with this that you have to notice is Scooby-Doo and his partners, they never run when they see this ghost. They encounter it and they stand, and you notice something, that ghost never chased them until they run. This is exactly what fear and faith is. The moment you run from your fear, that's when your faith is destroyed. You have to stand, and when you stand, that challenge, you realize, you know what, you're up for that challenge. And it is not his presence that chases you, but rather the presence of God makes you stand. Now let's look into this descriptively. In every aspect of fear, there's a storm. And what did God say? He said, I will be with you in the storm. I will be with you in the storm. Not around it, but in the storm. So let's look at the storms of life. Different storms of life comes in different ways. You can have the storm based on your health. You can have the storm based on finances. You can have the storm based on different aspects of your life. These are storms that we all face. If I ask every single one of you, I'm sure you have different storms that you're going through. Relationship, which we're going to go into on lots of details in our relationship series. But these are storms that we face every single day. These are storms that we either run away from or run to the wrong direction to get counsel. And this could build or destroy your faith. So when we talk about the storms of life, the storms of faith, the fear doesn't mean you've lost faith. The fear is an opportunity for you to introduce God, to introduce the challenger. Now we have something that we know that we do very well as Christians. When something comes across, say we're trusting God. It is great to trust God, but how is your house built? Can you withstand the storm? Can you stand in the midst of this problem? Because once this storm comes, once the health challenges come, the doctor will tell you the fact that yes, this sickness can only take you 2 months, 3 months to live. That is a fact, but the truth is different to the facts. That's where faith comes in. That's where the foundation comes in. Where is your house built on? Let's look at the verse and see how that works in terms of what we're speaking about. Matthew 14:26. Matthew 14:26. And it says, and when they saw Jesus walk on the water, they were afraid. And they said it's a ghost. Can you imagine that? You're in the middle of the storm in the night. You're already afraid as it is, and you see someone walking on water. It says they were afraid. Now, these are disciples that have sat at the feet of Jesus. These are disciples that know his words. These are disciples that know his promises. Now, this is the same as us. We go to church every day. We hear our pastors preach. But what it doesn't get us ready for is the real world when the fear comes in. Don't lose faith because you're afraid. That's a key word today. Don't lose faith because you're afraid. It's natural to be afraid. Even Jesus himself was afraid at one point. He asked for this cup to be taken away from him. But the most important thing is do not dwell in fear. Do not dwell in the aspect of where that fear is. Get the fear. When you feel it, don't let it stay in your heart. Don't let it dwell in your heart. Eradicate it with the promises of God. Change it. Change the narrative. Say, yes, that this is what God promised me. This is what's written in my life for me by him. So to build a solid foundation, there are 8 key aspects you need to focus on in his promises. Now, this solid foundation based narrowly, not just narrowly, but primarily on his promises. And this consists of 1. It says, I will be with you always. That's the first layer of your foundation. I will be with you always. The second promise, it says, I will protect you. Now, I don't know what you're going through. I don't know what situation in your life that you're facing at this moment that you feel afraid. Don't look to man to protect you. Don't look for the police to protect you. As you can see, the trauma we're facing in our country, in our nation, just even in the world today, no one's being protected by the authorities anymore. But he said, I will protect you. That's his promises to you. But you have to believe it. It will not work until you believe it and you confess it. The third promise said, I will be your strength. Now, God can only be your strength in your moment of weakness. You have to make yourself vulnerable to him. That's what he means. Weakness doesn't mean you cannot physically fight or you don't work out. What he means is that you have to be vulnerable to him. You have to say, Father, step in. I cannot do this by myself. You have to have faith in that word he has given you. This is now stacking your foundation, making sure it's strong. I will be your strength in a moment of weakness. It says, I will always answer you. So for him to say, I will always answer you, that's a promise. Now it means he's hoping that we call. He's hoping that we speak to him. That's when he said, I will always answer you. But you must speak. You must call upon him for him to pick up the phone call. You must call upon him for him to pick up the line. And he will never keep your call on hold. That I can guarantee you. I will always answer you. So have you called on him? Because I find out every single time, and most people I counsel and I speak to, they always say that they can't hear from God. But whenever I ask this question, have you called on him? They look at me like it's strange because they leave God as a final option rather than priority. Put him first. He cannot be shared. Put him first. Tell him, you're my only option. You're my first option. I'm calling on you. Please speak. Make yourself present today in my situation. And he said, I will always answer you. Then he said, I will provide for you. He'll be your provider. He'll be your source. And the reason he said this is because he knows the heart of man is wicked. You can ask a man, you can ask a woman to help you provide. You can ask for a loan, you can ask for something, but they will always want something in return. So if you make man your source, your faith is guaranteed to be destroyed. Because rather than looking up to the author and finisher of your faith, you're now looking up to man to protect and provide for you. In that aspect, you cannot move in boldness. You cannot come to him in boldness because you have asked the wrong source. I will always provide for you. He will make a way once you ask. Then he goes further and said, I will give you peace. If I ask anybody today, I guarantee nobody has peace at this moment. We are in a storm in our nation. We are in a storm in this country. We are in a storm in our personal life. But even in that storm, he said, I will give you peace. And notice something, in a tornado, when there's a storm, outside the storm is always a disaster. But the eye of the storm, the center of the storm is very peaceful. There's a reason for that. You have to be in the center. At the center of it all, that's where he is. You have to be in that center. And that's where that peace is. But you have to invite him. I will give you peace in the midst of the storm. It doesn't mean that the problem has been solved. But although the problem and the storm is roaring, in the middle of that problem, he will give you peace because you're focusing on his promises. Then he goes further and says, I will always love you. Most of our stress, most of our problem, most of our issues that destroys our faith in God is that we're trying to be loved. We're trying to be loved by what we understand by the carnal love, the man-made love, the worldly love, the failed promises of love. But God will always love you in the agape way. It's called the agape love. It's the love that wants nothing in return, the sacrificial love. He said he will always, and always, the key point of always means regardless of what you've done. So don't look at it as, okay, I'm not good enough. I'm not clean to come towards him. Would he care for me? Would he love you? Would he love me? Don't forget he died for you while you were still in sin. I will always love you. I will always love you. Once you understand these promises, you will not condemn yourself, for there's no longer condemnation. You will come to him and he will wash you and he will always love you. And finally he said, I will never leave nor forsake you. These are his promises. These are your foundation. Once you build your house on these promises, once you build your foundation on these promises, the house will not shake. The house will stand strong. These are the foundations that we need to build our house on in these last days. Confess these promises. And now I spoke about the roofing also. The roofing aspect is also very important, because once you've built a foundation on your house, it's been layered, you're protecting what's in it. The house is your heart. That's where the house is. The house is your heart. The foundation is his promises to you. But you have to protect this heart with what? With the confession of what comes out of your mouth, your mind. Now the roofing is known as your mind. For you to have a solid roof, an impeccable roof, a roof that can be penetrated by the rain, you have to confess these promises. This is the roofing aspect. We must speak it back to him. We must confess it back to him. We must meditate on his promises. This is when it works for us. So with the combination of a perfect foundation and a confession of a perfect roofing, your property is safe. Your word is safe. Your heart is safe. Matthew 7:25. Once all these promises are done and you've confessed it, your life will be an example of Matthew 7:25. And it says, and the rain fell, and the flood came, and the wind blew, and it beat on that house, but it did not fall, because it has been built on the rock, on a solid rock. So the rain will come, the storm will come. When you build your house, don't think that is it. That is when the devil now wants to tempt your faith. That's when he wants to do a foundation check to see how strong your foundation is. So once that house is built, the rain will come. Oh, the storm will come. It will come. It will come. I remember a situation where my wife and I were going through a serious situation. We prayed, and the storm was still coming. We prayed. Nothing was seeming to work. To the point where we say, you know what? Let's remember his promises. Let's confess his promises. We joined hand, and it says, where two agree, there he will be, and the world will be bound. We joined hand and we confessed his promises. We kept confessing his promises for days on end. And as we're confessing, it felt like the storm became stronger. It felt like the problem became stronger. But do not focus on the storm. That's the devil trying to give you his last shot, because he knows he's about to be eradicated. But we kept on promising, kept on confessing. And before you knew it, we had peace in the eye of the storm. Now it's up to you to decide which you let have dominion in your life. His word ahead of you, or the distraction of the storm present before you. The choice is yours. Build your house on a solid foundation. Do a foundational check. And if at any point you feel the storm is strong, or the storm is going too strong or too long, confess his promises. Meditate on his promises. And then that will give you peace in the eye of the storm. Thank you so much for joining us today, and God bless you. Thank you so much for joining us today on Let's Talk God. I know you've been blessed. We're blessed by having you also. Don't forget to always catch us every Tuesday at 6 p.m. on the dot. Don't be late on www.tostvnetwork.com. Also on our social network platform, which is TOS @TOS TV Network, and my personal handle @Mr. Okonkwo. Thank you so much, and God bless you.